Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you happen to happenstance into this dialogue with the new Untouchables. My name is Patrick Lovell, and we are recording this on Monday, January 26th, 2026, at approximately 8 p.m., sorry, Eastern Time. And it's obviously a whole groundswell of information that's swirling around coming out of Minneapolis, first and foremost, that we're going to address. So this is basically an impromptu recording with the folks that have a lot of information or at least insight into what can help guide us through this rough patch. And I just want to do brief introductions. To my immediate left is Marc, Dann, former Attorney General of the state of Ohio. Beneath him is Paul Pelletier, veteran of the Department of Justice and adjunct professor at George Washington University and in private practice. Immediately to his right is William K. Black, an expert in criminology and economics and all things regulation and corruption, and really just an incredible source of information as it relates to all of the things that we're in the midst of. And then further below is June Carbone. She is the Rabina Chair of Law, Science, and Technology at the University of Minnesota. And guys, I am going to.
And you said something about the.
And of course, June and Bill reside in the state of Minnesota, where of course it has our attention in the aftermath of the killing of Alex Pretti in what is just another in a saga of just unbelievable carnage that's taking place, at least on our social media. Don't know if it feels like that in Minnesota, Bill, in June, but I would imagine it might. But I thought that as we get started here, I was just going to show the actual footage of what took place, and so we can comment on it. But I'm just going to bring up some of the footage that's been all over the place, quite frankly. So let's take a look at this one.
And we have now a fuller picture of what occurred over just minutes when an initially non-violent encounter turned deadly and became yet another flashpoint in the nation's vigorous debate over immigration enforcement, the use of lethal force, and accountability. At least 3 minutes before Alex Pretti was shot and killed, he is seen at 8:58 a.m. Saturday holding his phone at a distance from immigration enforcement officers in an apparent attempt to record a nearby arrest. An eyewitness captured this video of Pretti filming the arrest. At no point does he appear to display a weapon. A minute later, Pretti appears to be using his phone to record two bystanders interacting with a federal officer before that officer is seen shoving one of them across the street. Another camera angle shows the officer shove one of those individuals into Pretti. You can see the two holding on to each other. The confrontation escalates. Both of Pretti's hands are visible. One holds the phone, the other he held up seemingly to protect himself from pepper spray. Whoa! Pretti is seen being pepper sprayed. Three officers grapple with him until he's taken down and held on the frozen pavement. Another group of officers then surrounds him. At 9:01, the federal officer in a gray jacket emerges from the scrum with a gun that appears to match the one Pretti had a permit to carry. Almost simultaneously, the first shot is fired. Officers step back. Within 5 seconds, 9 more shots, and soon after, the officer is heard. Pretti died at the scene. Now, almost immediately, the Trump administration declared the shooting justified. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said Pretti assaulted officers and intended to kill law enforcement. That's despite an eyewitness account filed under oath, Robin, contradicting the secretary's version.
And our own eyes seeing it for ourselves as well.
And before any investigation.
Right. What are the guidelines for deadly force, using deadly force?
The Department of Homeland Security does have its own policy saying a federal officer should only use deadly force when there's a reasonable belief of an imminent threat and should stop firing once that threat is neutralized. Even gripping or displaying a firearm is not enough, according to the DHS policy, to invoke deadly force.
Okay, so I believe that we have seen that, as well as, of course, the Greg Bovino and Kristi Noem and so forth throughout the day. And I wonder, June, if I could maybe ask you for opening reactions and comments.
And I want to emphasize several things. First, Alex Pretti should be seen as a hero. He was out there knowing it could be dangerous, filming things. He intervened to protect someone else. His last words, whether she was okay. And the folks who shot him are lawless, undisciplined, irresponsible, and set in motion by people who know, if they have half a brain, which we're not sure they do, that this is where it leads. Donald Trump began the year welcoming the confrontations, talking about the U.S. military using American cities for training. I want to say, however, that I think we are at an incredibly dangerous moment. What happened at the beginning of last week is the U.S. The ambassador from Australia to the United States resigned, saying publicly, the U.S. is governed by the village idiot. What happened in Davos showed, to anybody who cared to look, we are governed by the village idiot. The subsequent events indicated the rest of the world has figured out they have leverage, that simply making a few announcements about our trade war could bring down the stock market and the bond markets, and Trump, Taco Don, promptly changed his tune. But what is happening, the moment we're in, is, I think, a moment in which people are putting all these things together. So what I hear, the Europeans, what they were doing in preparation of an invasion of Greenland is a list of people to sanction. The oligarchs in the US to be sanctioned, the way Russian oligarchs were being sanctioned. The Danes have an app, identifies American products to avoid. The Canadians are leading a world effort to reconfigure world trade to leave out the United States. Investment managers certainly don't think this is a safe place to put their funds. In the meantime, what I hear, both in the city, what there has been a consistent drumbeat, a drumbeat saying, where are our oligarchs? Where are the businesses? Where is the business community? Where is Target? Today, they put out a statement, weak need, let's tone down, de-escalate violence. There are major corporations headquartered in the Twin Cities, and they have been silent. What I am hearing, whether it's from Paul Krugman talking to Europeans or from Sarah Longwell, somebody who prides herself on still being a Reaganite when it comes to policy, and what they are saying is that inequality today is worse than in the Gilded Age. And there's no such thing as democracy in the face of an increased concentration of wealth. What I am also hearing are statements. The oligarchs bear responsibility for this. 10 people contributed 50% of Trump's fundraising haul in August 2024, and that's before Elon Musk put in 300 million. What I am hearing is the oligarchs are responsible, sometimes directly, often indirectly, for the Roberts Court. So let me simply summarize a little bit of what's going on. We had a judge issue an order to ICE saying, obey the law. That's all she said. She had people in front of her who had been protesters, observers, who civil rights ICE had violated, and she issued an injunction saying, don't do it again. Don't violate the First Amendment rights of protesters again. It was an incredibly narrow decision. The Eighth Circuit promptly issued an administrative stay. We have magistrates who refuse to indict Don Lemon. Why? Don Lemon, the journalist who spent several hours filming protests around and in a church where one of the ministers is an ICE agent. The administration promptly appealed, of course. And the appellate court did something. I was listening to it on the way here, but the judge responded by saying, "You claim all of this is confidential. Therefore, I have no basis in which to rule. You, Justice Department, be in my office tomorrow with making whatever arguments you have to make." They decided to withdraw the appeal because they have no arguments to make. The case that is being heard today, and it's a fascinating case, is a 10th Amendment argument. And it actually has a series of components. The 10th Amendment reserves to the states any powers not expressly given to the federal government. And our state is saying, hey, you are invading our rights. The states retain whatever sovereignty is not expressly given to the federal government. It is also arguing that the Administrative Procedure Act has been violated. That is, what's ICE doing here? Their mission changes every day. They're here to investigate daycare fraud. Come on, that's a joke. They claim they're here to investigate violent criminals, except they have a list of all the violent criminals they apprehended. Almost every single one was apprehended by Minnesota police and turned over to ICE voluntarily through a detainer. Retainer where what happens is ICE picks up the people from the local jail. In other words, ICE does no work. It does no investigation. It just is handed on a single silver platter people who are, in fact, convicted of serious crimes by Minnesota law enforcement. Those are the only serious criminals we know of that ICE has apprehended. And then they claim they're here for any number of other reasons. Pam Bondi apparently sent a letter. One was a letter saying, take down your sanctuary city policies. That is not clear Minnesota has. Secondly, saying turn over your voter rolls and we'll leave. Well, that's blatantly unconstitutional. And so this court involves the 10th Amendment. It involves violation of ICE's authority as granted by Congress, and it involves violation of all kinds of Bill of Rights protections, including the First Amendment. Now, we all expect that the circuit will promptly overturn any injunction that's issued, given the recent precedents from the Supreme Court. But I want to emphasize one of the arguments they're not making, and then I will wrap up. This is an invasion. The word invasion is used in the complaint. It is an invasion by an army. ICE has the weaponry and the budget of many of the militaries in the world. If there's anything the founding fathers feared, it was an army in the hands of the federal government. The founding fathers debated whether to create a U.S. military at all or simply allow the president to rely on the state militias at that time. It was incredibly controversial when the FBI was created because the fear of a national police force was so strong and so deeply rooted in American history. What ICE is doing is what the founding fathers identified with tyranny. So we are awaiting this decision, but the Roberts Court will find a way to eviscerate, I think, whatever is done.
Wow. Yeah, boy, particularly unbelievable considering we're about to celebrate the 250th anniversary and all things Roberts Court. I mean, 250th anniversary of the American Revolution. Bill, what are your thoughts?
Okay, I don't know if it's only me, but I can barely hear you, by the way, in terms of your game. So the June was explaining the action in the church, the protest. What happened is the Justice Department took an emergency writ of mandamus to the Eighth Circuit secretly without informing the district court judge who had ruled against them in Minnesota, and said that it was an outrageous violation of judicial discretion to deny immediately arresting and holding potentially incommunicado as terrorists these people who peacefully went into this church and protested that their pastor was the head of ICE in Minnesota. Even the spectacularly conservative Eighth Circuit said no. Like absolutely no in all of this. So that's the state of play currently on that case. The business community, let me read the first part of their full text of their statement. Open letter from more than 60 CEOs of Minnesota-based companies. This is the local state chamber of commerce. The business community in Minnesota prides itself in providing leadership and solving problems to ensure a strong and vibrant state. The recent challenges facing our state have created widespread disruption and tragic loss of life. For the past several weeks, representatives of Minnesota's business community have been working every day behind the scenes with federal, state, and local officials to advance real solutions. These efforts have included close communication with the governor, the White House, the vice president, and the local mayors. There are ways for us to come together to foster progress. And then they go down to what they want, which is to get back to business, right? Not a word about democracy. Not a word about the rule of law. Not a word. They don't even name the victims that have been shot. Their names disappear from the narrative. And as for this thing that the Chamber of Commerce has a whole history of being there from the right side, it was the predecessor of the Chamber of Commerce, an even more fascistic organization, right? That kicked off the famous general strike in Minneapolis during the Great Depression, because Minneapolis was a complete yellow dog city. And what that meant is if you joined a union, they not only fired you, they forbade you to work anywhere, right? And they had a network of undercover people from the equivalent of the Pinkertons who would pose as workers and then find the people who were proposing, to support a union. And then when there was a strike called, again, in the winter, in the Great Depression, sounding familiar to today, these citizen goons, who, by the way, were trained at the University of Minnesota athletic fields, that's where they did their drills, ambushed a bunch of the Teamster workers and killed them. Killed a significant number of them, wounded something like 12 additional folks. And that was the association which was given, wait for it, police powers by the city of Minneapolis, so that the goon squads could actually, with civil immunity, kill the workers. So when you say they have a long history, that's right, but it's an awful history, and they have failed the moment utterly. As June said, they've now dropped the mask, and they are openly extorting, right? They being the Trump administration, saying that you have to give us all information on these various centers that receive funds. What does that have to do with immigration? And you have to give us your voter rolls. And then she concludes, and you must support President Trump. She actually says that as if it is the duty of the opposing candidate to support Donald Trump when he comes in and terrorizes the city. And again, there's not a word in here from the Chamber of Commerce about the fact that the administration is lying. And even Fox News now is having trouble trying to justify the lies because they are so absolutely blatant. And let me just end with They are immediately demonizing. And the Chamber of Commerce doesn't fight back on this for a second. The people that are killed. They don't say a single word. They just call it tragic. This was a VA nurse working with our veterans in the ICU, intensive care units, awful conditions and such. And what was his last act on earth? As June said, the police had violently smashed a woman on icy streets to the pavement. And she was struggling to get up, and he moved to interpose his body against this assault on a woman. May we all be so lucky as to have our last act something that exemplified his life. And the fact that the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce doesn't even mention this man and his sacrifice is despicable.
Thank you for that, Bill. I'm going to try to talk a little louder. I think
You're fine.
I'm somewhat blown away by everything that's taken shape. I find myself having to turn down the volume of my naturally loud voice so I don't express what I'm feeling. You know, I'm Paul.
We were blaming it on the dogs.
Yeah. Your thoughts, please.
Did you ask me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. First of all, let's talk Turkey for a second. Let's talk about what real law enforcement is. When you really care about law enforcement, you just want to enforce the law. I've participated in a bunch of, and I wasn't an agent, but I supervised a lot of takedowns of very violent people, cartel leaders and everything like that. Never once did the agents dress in camouflage. Never once did the agents mask their face. Never once did they go in without an operational plan on how to take that person down. And never once was it more than 10 people. Okay. Sometimes there might have been a little bit more, but that was just to sort of maintain the perimeter. If you want to arrest violent people, if that's really your purpose, there's a way you do it that doesn't involve interfering with the public or getting in the way of the public. And there's a way to do it safely and securely. And everything they're doing in Minneapolis is against every law enforcement principle that I know. So what does that tell you? Because as June said, most of the violent people they were arrested, they're taking out of jail that have already been convicted, right? So they don't have to do any work. So what does that mean? It means what we've talked about ad nauseum on this show, and that is that this is a staged provocation in Minnesota in order to create a vehicle of division so that Trump can use it to either whip up his followers and or insert the military and or, as we saw in that letter that the Attorney General wrote, to get the voter rolls. Okay? So none of everything that you hear on TV coming from the Republican administration is bullshit, is 100% bullshit. I sat there yesterday and listened to, first of all, I listened to Christine Ohm say that these people, that this guy, this wonderful human being, brandished a gun at the agents. I saw that little freaking pipsqueak, Bovino, say that his intent was to create havoc on military officers. And then I saw Todd Blanche on Meet the Press, and I was so pissed off, I ordered a transcript. I got a transcript of his conversation. And what he said was that he provoked it, that he was violent, and that effectively blaming him. And then on top of that, he said, and it's because of this policy that Minnesota has of sanctuary cities. First of all, that whole sanctuary city stuff, as June said, is bullshit. It's complete bullshit. It's just a word that right-wing lunatics use in order to justify stuff. So, and I saw some of the news conferences this afternoon, they're blaming Minneapolis and they're blaming sanctuary cities. And what Kristen Walker kept going back at him was she didn't do a good enough job, but she did a pretty good job. She's usually terrible. But she said, you have 3,000 men. What possibly can local law enforcement do? How are they gonna do anything? So look, when we did law enforcement operations, you would have local law enforcement. It would be very titrated. You'd have local law enforcement do their job, and then you'd come in and do your job. You would extract the person, and you would go away. These are 10, 15, 30 people marching down the street. They are trying to provoke a situation where they can act. And then we all saw it with our own eyes, like we did with Good, and now we're seeing it with Pretti. He absolutely did nothing that was violent and only tried to protect another person. And so when you get the administration lying like that you get the executives in DOJ, the second highest person in DOJ, lying to the American public. And then Kristen Walker goes and said, what are you going to tell his parents? Well, the investigation's not done. We don't know what happened before the tapes began. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So anyway, the Wall Street Journal today, the New York Times, they all come out with editorials that said, stop lying to the American people. So why are they lying? Because there's nothing there's no nothing true or law enforcement purposeful about what they are doing, because they are just there to provoke, period. And so maybe the backlash that they're facing now will have some impact. I do agree with June, though, ultimately, unless and until there's an economic impact, I don't believe they're going to stop. They may get out of Minnesota. I'm not sure. Like they're bringing in the bribed felon to come in and fix things, right? Holman, who took a $50,000 in a cash in a bag, they're bringing him to fix things. But I don't know how we break through to say this is all bullshit, that nothing that they're saying is true, that what they're really doing. And by the way, that little Goebbels said that this guy was a domestic terrorist. This guy was a domestic terrorist. I mean, these people have families, right? So, I mean, they should do, I wish Minneapolis would do this, would rent a stadium and do a Charlie Kirk type grouping of everybody to support the Pretti. I just wish they would do that, because at the end of the day, this is what America is all about. Pretti is what everybody should aspire to be: someone who protests and helps people for a day job, and was out there on the street helping people, right? And they slaughtered him in cold blood. So I don't know what the answer is. I don't know that they're going to get out of Minneapolis, but I do think, as I said a couple of weeks ago, I think these are Kent State moments, and I just don't know which one is going to crystallize enough. But I don't think they're going to stop. Sorry for my soapbox.
Oh man, no, there was music to my ears. I'll tell you that. And Marc, please, your thoughts.
Well, it's for years watching government lawyers and governments operate. I've become concerned that that the political consultants are driving the dialogue all the time, and they are running this alleged law enforcement operation like a political campaign, and much more concerned about the twist and the spin. With no, as Paul pointed out, with no connection whatsoever to the reality of the situation. They don't even make a pretense anymore to pretend that there's some a definable connection. It was, look, I mean, it was, you were always under pressure as a candidate running for office. That your folks wanted you to, whatever question they ask, answer the question you want to answer. And here's the message that we want to deliver, and here's what it's going to be. But even the most cynical of politicians, at every level, would never think to take that kind of spin making and denial of reality as a tactic and weave it into your government activities, weave it into your execution of your ultimate duties as an elected office holder, or an appointed cabinet member, or an appointed director of an agency, or director of enforcement, or whatever the title is. And in this administration, people have been appointed to these jobs not for their qualifications, not for their experience in doing the job that they've been appointed to do, but because of their skill in storytelling, and storytelling without regard to truthfulness. I mean, Saturday Night Live is often right on target. With the I don't know if you saw they had the Kennedy Center ass kissing awards, for the top ass kissers. Kristi Noem, I think, was on the list, and JD Vance. And I mean, these folks are in those positions because they're willing to say or do anything that Trump makes them or wants them to say at the time. And he's not loyal to them at all. I mean, he'll throw them over just like this Bovino. He's on his way out the door. Clearly, he'll throw these folks over the rail in a heartbeat. There's no two-way loyalty there whatsoever. And so it's just tragic to think that so many people. I mean, look, there must have been something good about Kristi Noem. I mean, people in North Dakota are smart people, and they're good people, and they elected her governor twice, I think. In that state. You guys in Minnesota are a little closer to watch that from Fargo's not that far away. But I mean, and yet she was willing to throw that all away. And whether there's a great reckoning or there's a day of judgment, we watched in the storm. We watched the movie Nuremberg, which was probably not a great thing at this time in history to be paying attention to. But there may not be a legal reckoning. There may not be, and maybe there shouldn't be a legal reckoning, because what we don't want to do is continue to cycle this cycle of persecution of the prior administration's actions using the criminal system. And I think that's a debate we can have in the future. But in terms of their reputation, reputation and their ability to be respected, contributing members of the community. I mean, they're willing to throw it all away for an appointment that he's a second-term president, and in the worst case or the best case for them can last another 3 years. I don't understand it. I've never seen anything like it. Power certainly has a lot of appeal, and certainly there's plenty of enriching going on of people around all this, which we don't want to lose sight of. All of a sudden the ICE funding bill has become a vehicle for a $20 million contract to a politically connected company that makes body cams. The cynical nature by which, as June pointed out, the foreign policy decisions are being analyzed, the domestic policy decisions, the law enforcement decisions through this, it's just truly astounding. And it's heartbreaking as somebody that they grew up thinking that what people do in these appointed and elective offices is meaningful and important, and it's a privilege to be able to serve, and that they serve the whole country, not just the people that voted for the person that appointed them. And there's in less than a few years, we've completely lost that. I mean, what a tragic loss for the country that we don't have that mindset anymore. So I'm rambling, but you all said this also eloquently before. I do have a question though, and Bill and June, maybe you'll have a better idea. Where's the Minnesota bar? Where's the organized bar? I'm quite proud of the efforts that the Cleveland Bar has made here in focusing on the rule of law and speaking up and raising those questions. And certainly, I have lower expectations for the Chamber of Commerce. But I have much higher expectations for the organized bar. Have they been outspoken? Have they been active? I did some Googling. I couldn't find anything.
So one of the things, because we have been under assault by the university has been under assault from Trump before all this started, is the university is walking a fine line, but the law school community has just put out a statement today, signed by many of us individually, calling the events lawless and in support of the people who were killed. I would add that Alex Pretti is a University of Minnesota grad, and his former wife graduated from the law school in 2024. So lots of folks in our community know the family, knew him. We have an immigration clinic. It is overwhelmed with habeas cases. It used to do asylum and refugee work, but that's effectively been shut down. I have asked repeatedly what they're doing, and frankly was surprised they wouldn't want a higher profile. And the answer is their clients don't want it. So the folks who are doing this kind of work who are representing individual clients who are trying to fight ICE, are deliberately keeping a low profile. And I'd add, we do have some profiles encourage, or at least realism. One of the gubernatorial candidates, Chris, I don't know if it's Madel or I'm not quite sure how to pronounce the last name, Madel, withdrew today, saying that although he initially supported the ICE efforts, was running a law enforcement platform, he couldn't stomach what was going on and withdrew as a Republican candidate. So there's a lot happening. There are a number of people, certainly the political leadership is speaking out. Not only Walz, but the Attorney General and Mayor Fry in Minneapolis, and the mayor and local law enforcement is speaking out. We have stories of local law enforcement officers, if they happen to be people of color, having been stopped by ICE.
Right.
And they're
So there was
none too happy about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
there was a very powerful press conference. I think there were 4 or 5 of the suburban DA, top sheriff's department types, the leaders, and they said that in every case, their personnel, when they were stopped, they were people of color, and they made
Off
this.
duty, not in uniform, being stopped, and every single one who was stopped was a person of color.
Right. Now, the bar hasn't had that much involvement because they do so little. The Trump administration, do so little through the courts in Minnesota, right? They pretty quickly viewed the courts here as not that sympathetic to them. As you know, the top folks in the U.S. Attorney's Office resigned when they told them, don't investigate the people that actually did the murder, investigate the spouse of the victim, right? So they've also lacked capacity to do much here, which is part of what you're seeing with this effort to go after the people that went into the church and these emergency mandamus action in front of the Eighth Circuit as well. They've been denied by the judiciary, including, the low level, I'm not demeaning them, but just in the organization chart, the magistrates. So, the magistrate said, no, hell no, to most of the warrants for very good reasons. And, so we have the next step of the representations where they're going to make false representations to the court. That's, of course, when they've been getting in trouble. And part of the answer is, do we still have some folks there who will be the future whistleblowers that will have more documents that they can come forward with? The problem, in some sense, with the initial whistleblowers is they went so quickly, right?
Yes.
And they just said no immediately, and they probably hadn't, gone through their files as to all the useful information that they had. And they were out that same day that they announced it.
Yeah, I also want to say something about lots of what I'm seeing locally. The level of community strength and rallying around is enormous. And on my local listserv, what I see is several things. First, an enormous number of people, very low key, going to protests, asking questions, getting groceries for people who are fearful of leaving their homes, driving people to work, having them hide in the back seat under blankets so that they aren't targeted for random stops. That's all coming in the form of community support. And then I see the trolls. The trolls almost always have addresses that are in Lakeville or Carver. These are the exurbs. They're an hour away from the city, and they're nasty. They're like little automatons who echo the administration line. The state is divided. But one of my colleagues, who's a political scientist, did a small scale study in which they showed pictures to people, a video of a violent ICE arrest. Again, this is of an immigrant. And no indication the arrest is unlawful. A nonviolent ICE arrest, and then no video. And they asked them before and after showing the videos, do you support the president's immigration policies? What they got when they showed the violent video, but not the others, is a 10% across the board drop. 10% by old people and young people, Democrats and Republicans, conservatives and liberals. Only one group responded other than with the straight across the board 10% drop, and that was African Americans. Their support dropped by 23%. Nate Silver has a piece out today in Silver Bulletin. The drop in support for Trump's immigration correlates strongly with the violent pictures. So I want to suggest, and this is what is terrifying me, there have been some announcements today that Bongino and a number of ICE officers are leaving the city. The publicity this is generating is not good for the administration. But this publicity put Greenland off the airwaves, and Greenland put the Epstein files off the airwaves. What's next? My prediction is Cuba. But I think until the killing of Alex Pretti, it was going to be the mobilization of the U.S. military to invade Minnesota.
What I thought, June, which I find amazing when I watch them, the news reporters interview people who are there protesting. Invariably, everyone mentions they're screwing up our community, they're hurting our community. They all use the word community, which is incredible to me because I don't use that word generally, but it's unbelievable how these Minnesotans all use that word about everybody, that talking about the aliens, the people from other countries. They all use that word. It's unbelievable.
Well, this is a strong community in a low-key kind of way. One of the things that is different about Minneapolis is that in part because the integration of the city happened later, you did not have the white flight that accompanied the original wave of school desegregation back in the 70s. It is a segregated city now, but it is still an overwhelmingly middle-class city. And I won't say the racial climate is perfect, but the city did welcome the Somali refugees. and they are both in the city and in the suburbs. And there have been new waves of immigration since. But here, overwhelmingly, the people moving in are well-educated, upper middle class folks, and they're tolerant, they're open, they have been welcoming of new migrants in a way that is distinctive. And it's one of the reasons Trump targeted Minnesota. When you look at the Somali community, there are very few undocumented people here. They came, welcomed with open arms, attained refugee status. Some of the people being arrested, the father of that little boy with the backpack, he wasn't undocumented. He was seeking refugee status with papers, an application pending, and legal status to be in the United States. Now, Trump is tearing up people with that kind of status. He's tearing up the papers, he's tearing up the foundation for their being in the US. But that person wasn't undocumented. And we have a small, although we have quite vibrant immigrant communities, we have a dramatically smaller percentage of both recent immigrants and undocumented immigrants than the entire southern half of the country or the coasts.
I'm going to direct this to you, Paul, if you can hear me. Thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay, cool. So, look, throughout this effort on behalf of everyone who's participated here on the New Untouchables from the very beginning, again, I like to emphasize this all the time. Each and every one of you have been as transparent, as forthright, as I'd say inspiring as I've ever heard in media by legal experts, because legal experts, as Marc has pointed out, especially those running for political office, will answer the questions that they want to answer rather than the questions that are being questioned a lot of the time. And what I'm hearing throughout all of social media in light of what happened with Renee Nicole Good last week, and of course this week with Alex Pretti, and to your point about community, at least we mentioned it, I think it's like sub-zero temperatures with wind chill, right? Where thousands of people are being able to rise for their community, do everything they can in light of the fact that there's murders by this force that we've seen. Like, and I love the way you talked about everybody within the administration. Certainly like to hear more of that. But June had said earlier in our process that it took 2 world wars and a Great Depression to basically right the ship, to give us what I guess we all grew up with. A government of, by, and for the people that did its best, I think, through the likes of you guys, to be able to enforce the law without fear or favor to the powerful as well, in a way that we all just assumed was our country. I think many of us took that granted for a long time. We've seen some major changes over the course of the last several years, but this is transparently out of control. This has got the temperature of what you deliver every day, and it is lawless. So as we kind of close out here for this particular session, looking forward, I mean, I love your idea about having everybody in the stadium, but don't you think every stadium around the United States ought to participate as well? Something to that effect. I don't know.
Yeah, I do. Well, first of all, I'm a law enforcement guy, so it's a little bit beyond my pay grade. But the reality is, to me, that the answer to this is always going to be economic. It'll be at the voting booth, should we be allowed to get there, but it's going to be economic in some way. In other words, as June pointed out earlier, there is an economic reckoning coming to the United States that we have not felt yet, and that's because our Wall Street is driven by how right now is driven by how AI is doing and how the well-to-do people are buying and selling stocks. I don't know if you saw it, but the price of gold today went up to hit $5,000 an ounce, and so the economic fallout of the tariffs, of all this stuff that he's doing to piss off our greatest friends, has not hit yet. And I do think that the prices of commodity, not commodities, of what people buy every day, food and supplies and everything, I don't believe that those have hit their top value. And I think that the inflation is not tamed and is going to go up. But, in a couple of months, I think May it is, he's going to replace the chairman of the Fed, right? And it's not going to be good. It's going to be someone who is a yes man for Trump, and the world economy is not going to respond well to that. So all I'm saying is I still think the answer is economic. I really wish, rather than just protest, people would stop buying stuff, that companies would stop selling stuff, go on a strike for a week, because that's what people respond to. That's just what happens. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think people get out in the street all day long. I can't believe in Minneapolis they do it in 20 below weather. I won't even go out if it's below 30. But that is unbelievable. But it's not going to move the dial sufficient to change things. I wish I knew the answer, but I do. I've always said it's going to be rooted in the economy, and I still think so.
Oh, I do want to talk more about that. So, what Europe had begun to do when they thought Trump might invade Greenland is to have a list of oligarchs on whom to impose sanctions. That list is not public. What I was seeing on the progressive podcasts is the beginning of a list of those companies, those individuals who are Trump enablers. What I'm also seeing is, again, Krugman speculation with a guy in Europe who studies inequality is that California may be the first place in the world to have a real wealth tax. California is trying to get a proposition on the ballot that applies to those who are in the state on January 1st, 2026, so they can't leave. I'm sure the Supreme Court, the Roberts Court, will quickly strike that down. But what you have are a number of movements that identify. The problem is not just the Trump base. I mean, the Trump base lives in an echo chamber that Rupert Murdoch constructed. You don't have the modern Republican Party without the oligarchs. And even if Trump won fair and square in 2024, his financing, I mean, the ability to put all of those ads in Ohio attacking Sherrod Brown and identifying Kamala with trans rights comes from the oligarchs. There has to be that kind of reckoning. And you're increasingly seeing it. I mean, what I see in left circles is that's what people are talking about now, as opposed to, well, they still talk about racism and sexism. But the emphasis on economic inequality and on the unaccountable power of the oligarchs, which leads to corruption and empowers Trump, are all of a piece.
And to make it local, this area is actually a major corporate center, right? Places like Target are headquartered here, and the protest actions, particularly by people of color, have very seriously harmed Target's profits. So one of the remarkable things, again, in this letter that the Chamber of Commerce has just put out, is all the barks and dogs that didn't bark. The folks here from minority communities that came or they're, relatively recently from other countries, they are major part of the workforce. They are major part of consumption. And the Chamber of Commerce could not be bothered to say, and we stand with our workers and our customers who the president has degraded as people from shithole countries, and all of whom should be, removed from our country. And you're right about local sports, because when this second murder occurred by the DHS ICE consortium, the voice of the Minnesota Vikings promptly came out and did a dismissive joke about, well, now we see what's going to happen to those people that get paid to come here to protest. A complete myth, obviously, and about a person who obviously didn't come to Minnesota for any of these purposes. But that's the communities that June was talking about. There is a division. There is a very, very hard right-wing group of Minnesotans, but all those folks in the middle-ish range have been swinging very much against Trump as a result of these actions. And Paul is absolutely right. We can crush them in their pocketbook.
And just one thing. Didn't the Somalis support Trump in the election? I'm guessing. It may not be true.
Some Somalis did. It's just like there were a number of Latinos for Trump as well.
All right. Well, they're not going to this time, I'll tell you.
No, let me emphasize politics of the state. What is different about Minnesota from, say, Wisconsin is that we're a draw for the upper Midwest. When we first moved here 12 years ago, the local papers were running stories. Actually, the national press was running stories talking about how there were two cities in flyover country that had reinvented themselves: Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Pittsburgh. What the two cities have in common is great universities that are a focus of science research, and then a large number of very good liberal arts colleges in addition to the major universities. So you have an incredibly well-educated populace. What we find in the law school, 2/3 of our students come out of state, 2/3 of our students stay here. And students who are not from the coasts find they like Minneapolis. It's an urban area. It's a dynamic city. It's relatively liberal, but it is not New York or LA. You can still afford to live here. And that what we've seen over the time we've been here is, again, the only dynamic growing part of the state. They're the Twin Cities, not the countryside. They're losing population. And the suburbs went from being, when we moved here, primarily Republican to, with the election of Donald Trump in 2016, primarily Democratic. And so the state, the rural areas have become more Republican, but the state population as a whole has become more Democratic because the in-migrants, who tend to be very well educated, relatively prosperous, and vote, are more liberal than the people in the rural areas who are losing ground. The differences are accelerating, but the next swing is toward the Democratic Party. And the contrast was with Wisconsin. We also went through a period about the time Scott Walker was governor of Wisconsin, where we had Tim Pelletier, but Pelletier was more moderate and did not rig things the way Scott Walker did. One of the reasons is that when I came, having left Kansas City, the business community in Missouri, the whole state, is how do we take the state and have it move backwards? They know nothing about universities. When I dealt with the Board of Trustees, when I was on the Faculty Senate, it's like they would diagnose problems, sometimes accurately, and then announce solutions that would have the opposite effect of what they intended. They know nothing about the academy, and they know nothing about how to create great universities. Here, the business community had a much stronger and closer relationship with the university, and in both directions. The university is not that liberal compared to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and it has close ties to the business community, and the business community has largely recognized it needs the university, and that has kept the state as a whole more moderate than a state like Wisconsin, where Milwaukee definitely went through its Rust Belt period, and where Madison, which is not in a major city, it's an hour east, is viewed as radical. And Scott Walker, who is not a college graduate, waged war on the University of Wisconsin, diminishing it. We get a lot of students from Wisconsin because today we are a much better law school. And the university has not had a hatchet applied to it the way the University of Wisconsin did during that period. So we are a success story. And that has meant over time, because the in-migrants, and I'm not talking about the Somalis, I'm talking about the Iowans, have supported a much more moderate, progressive tradition within the state.
Well, thank you to you all for participating with little advanced timing, but in response to all things happening in Minneapolis. So thank you for your guidance and your perspective, and as always, just the powerful leadership that you all provide. So, my friends out there, please like and subscribe and share. Please check out thenewuntouchables.com. Please check out thecleannewdeal.org. And as we move through this, try to stay as safe as you can, but stay courageous and stay smart. But just know that there are people amongst us that have the wherewithal, that if we can get millions of people behind those that are professionals in this instance, I think we can find a solution to this, hopefully before it's too late. So famous last words. Guys, thank you all. Anybody have anything else?
As they say in Boston, stay warm.
Stay warm. All right. Thank you to you all. All the best. Until next time, be well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.